What if the global economy as we know it is currently standing on a trapdoor and the levers about to be pulled in Tehran? We are witnessing a geopolitical convergence so massive and so sudden that it feels less like diplomacy and more like the final seconds of a countdown. While the world has been focused on the grinding attrition in Ukraine, a new, much more explosive front is opening up that could render every previous strategy obsolete. The pieces of the puzzle aren't just moving, they are locking into place for a confrontation that will redefine the next decade of human history. The atmosphere in the halls of power has shifted from concern to outright alarm. For months, I have been tracking the pulse of the Middle East, specifically the escalating tensions surrounding Iran. But today, the situation hit a breaking point. In a move that signaled the end of the wait-and-see era, the U.S. Secretary of State officially designated Iran as a state sponsor of wrongful detention. This isn't just another layer of red tape. It is a calculated legal and diplomatic escalation. By targeting the regime for holding political prisoners and Americans unjustly, the administration is building a moral and legal fortress to justify what comes next. They are essentially telling the world that the time for talking is over. The rhetoric is clear: leave Iran now, or face the consequences of being caught in a crossfire that no one can stop. Look at the bricks being laid in this wall of escalation. We see not one, but multiple aircraft carrier strike groups moving into position. We see the total collapse of the Geneva talks, where months of negotiation ended in a hollow silence. We see Israel's healthcare system entering a state of total mobilization, calling for emergency blood supplies and preparing for mass casualties. When you see major powers like Canada, China, and the UK ordering their citizens to evacuate immediately, you have to understand that these aren't precautionary measures. These are the frantic actions of governments that know the fuse has already been lit. The metaphors of the past no longer apply here. This isn't a simmering pot, it's a pressure cooker with a jammed valve. My analysis of Iranian sources confirms that the rhetoric on the other side is just as lethal. They are already naming Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv as a primary target, citing the presence of U.S. Air Force refueling tankers as a direct provocation. Think about that. We are talking about the potential for direct strikes on one of the most sensitive hubs in the region. This is the definition of a tinderbox. Even more startling is what is happening behind the scenes with global commerce. Maersk, the largest shipping container company on the planet, has started rerouting its entire fleet. They are abandoning the Suez Canal and the Red Sea, opting instead for the long, expensive journey around the Cape of Good Hope at the tip of Africa. This is a massive vote of no confidence in regional stability. When the kings of global trade decide the shortest route is too dangerous, you know the risk of a black swan event in the Strait of Hormuz is at an all-time high. Roughly 20% of the world's crude oil flows through that narrow choke point. If that gate slams shut, the global economy won't just slow down, it will suffer a cardiac arrest. We are also seeing a strange and perhaps desperate shift in the diplomatic landscape. Recent reports indicate that American tourists are being quietly evacuated through Jordan and Egypt, a fact that is being largely ignored by mainstream media. Meanwhile, embassies from Russia to the UK are thinning their ranks or pulling out entirely. The air is thick with the sense of an ending. It's as if the world is holding its breath, waiting for the first spark to hit the gasoline. But there is a political civil war happening within the United States as well. Just minutes ago, as the new designations against Iran were being announced, senior members of the Senate began sounding the alarm about shadow diplomacy. There are concerns that unofficial negotiators are trying to broker deals behind the scenes without Senate oversight or constitutional ratification. This creates a dangerous kitchen cabinet scenario where the actual architects of foreign policy are being bypassed. As one senior senator put it, an agreement that isn't ratified by Congress isn't worth the paper it's written on. It lacks the staying power to provide long-term certainty for our allies in Ukraine or the Middle East. It's like having your friends pretend to be the police instead of calling the actual department. It creates a vacuum of authority at the exact moment when we need absolute clarity. And then there is the nuclear shadow. The UN Atomic Energy Commission has just confirmed that Iran has stored over 9,000 kilograms of highly enriched uranium at an undisclosed location. For years, we were told this capability had been neutralized or deterred. That was an illusion. The material is there, the delivery systems are ready, and the diplomatic off-ramps have been barricaded. We are watching a nation walk right up to the edge of a cliff, talking tough every step of the way, seemingly convinced they can fly. But gravity is a relentless force in geopolitics. The deterrents of the past are failing, and we are entering a phase of real-time history where the maps we used yesterday are becoming obsolete. The geopolitical chessboard is shifting in a way that makes the Cold War look like a game of checkers. To understand the gravity of the situation, we have to look at the map of the Middle East, not as a collection of borders, but as a dense network of crosshairs. Right now, there is an incredible concentration of military force in the region, what many are calling the most lethal collection of firepower ever assembled in one place. We aren't just talking about a few ships, we are looking at a massive armada poised to respond to any provocation from Iran. While some debate if it's the largest in history by sheer numbers, there is no doubt it is the most sophisticated in terms of strike capability. This is the Ring of Fire strategy. On one side, you have a dense cluster of U.S. bases spanning from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf. On the other, you have the Iranian defensive and offensive positions. The space between them is the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most sensitive jugular vein for energy. If this artery is severed, the economic shockwaves will hit every gas station and grocery store on the planet within 48 hours. It is exactly like the situation in Taiwan with semiconductor chips. If the supply is cut, the modern world simply stops functioning. But there is a deeper layer to this conflict that connects the deserts of the Middle East to the frozen trenches of Eastern Europe. The war in Ukraine is about to be fundamentally transformed by what happens in Tehran. For years, the alliance between Moscow and Tehran has been a marriage of convenience that turned into a military lifeline. They aren't just trading oil. They are moving advanced missile technology and thousands of Shahed drones through the Caspian Sea, a route where Western checks and balances simply do not exist. This is the Tehran-Moscow pipeline, and it is the fuel for Russia's aggression. Think of it this way. Iran is to Russia what Great Britain was to the United States in World War II, a vital, unsinkable aircraft carrier and a logistical hub. If Iran is neutralized, or if it is forced to turn its gaze inward to survive a domestic or regional conflict, Russia loses its most important partner. The enormity of that shift cannot be overstated. We are talking about peeling away a cornerstone of the Kremlin strategy. If the Iranian lifeline is cut, Russia's ability to sustain high-frequency drone and missile attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure collapses. The current reality for Ukraine is a brutal cycle. Saturated air defenses, high-cost interceptions, and constant waves of Iranian-made tech. But if a full-scale war breaks out involving Iran, that flow of material stops instantly. Iran will have to hoard every scrap of technology, every drone, and every missile for its own survival. For Russia, the cheap war ends. Their strike capabilities would plummet, and the cost of every engagement would skyrocket. A weakened Iran isn't just a Middle Eastern objective, it is a military necessity for a safer Ukraine. We are also hearing whispers of a preemptive strike scenario. If Israel or the U.S. decides that the nuclear threshold has been crossed and they unload on Iranian positions, all bets are off. The crystal ball becomes murky because we have never seen a conflict involving this level of high-tech weaponry in such a condensed space. It wouldn't just be a bombing run like we saw in the mid-2020s. This would be a systematic dismantling of a regional power's infrastructure. And then there is the wild card, the political transition in the West. We are seeing statements about friendly, hostile takeovers of regional players like Cuba and a complete restructuring of how we handle adversaries. The old rules of diplomacy, the slow, bureaucratic grind of the State Department are being replaced by a more aggressive, business-minded approach to global power. Whether you call it art of the deal or peace through strength, the objective is the same. Disrupt the alliances of our enemies before they can solidify into a new world order. The bottom line is that the partnership between Moscow and Tehran is no longer just a diplomatic concern. It is a target. By disrupting this axis, the West forces Russia into a more expensive, less frequent cadence of attack. It's a net positive for the defense of Kyiv, but it comes at a staggering risk of a global conflagration. We are watching the gears of a massive machine start to turn, and once they reach full speed, there is no hitting the brakes. As we stand on the precipice of this potential shift, we have to look at the cold, hard numbers of the energy markets. Iran and Venezuela are not just names on a map. They are the titans of global oil reserves, holding the first and third spots respectively. Imagine for a moment a scenario where the geopolitical alignment shifts so radically that India and other emerging giants begin soaking up cheap Iranian and Venezuelan oil instead of Russian crude. This wouldn't just be a trade deal, it would be a financial decapitation of the Kremlin's war chest. While this scenario remains in the realm of the possible rather than the probable, the mere fact that it is being discussed in high-level briefings tells you how much is at stake. We are not in June of 2025 anymore. The days of limited engagements like the Midnight Hammer bombing runs are behind us. If the United States and its allies truly decide to unload on the Iranian regime, the consequences will ripple into every corner of the globe. We are talking about a total restructuring of the world order. It's a gamble of historic proportions. On one hand, you could effectively end the war in Ukraine by starving Russia of its most aggressive partner. On the other, you risk a global economic seizure that could last for years. The two pillars supporting Russia right now are North Korea and Iran. You can argue about which one is more vital, but if you knock one out, the entire roof comes crashing down on Moscow's ambitions. This is the definition of a game changer. I don't use that term lightly, but when you look at the sheer volume of military hardware amassed in the region and the breakdown of every diplomatic safeguard we've relied on for decades, there is no other way to describe it. We are watching the end of an era and the violent birth of another. This is why you need to stay vigilant. The situation is moving faster than the news cycle can keep up with. We are in a period where imminent isn't just a buzzword. It's a reality being lived out by sailors on carriers and citizens in the streets of Tehran and Tel Aviv. The pieces are all on the board. The players have made their opening moves and the clock is ticking. What do you think? Are we witnessing the beginning of a global liberation or the start of a catastrophe we aren't prepared for? Is the risk of neutralizing Iran worth the potential reward of a peaceful Ukraine? Drop your take in the comments right now. I want to hear your analysis. If this breakdown opened your eyes to the hidden connections in global affairs, smash that like button and subscribe with notifications turned on. Stay ahead of the curve, because in this world, the only thing more dangerous than the conflict itself is being left in the dark. Be blessed, stay safe, and stay informed.